Hello, teacher friends. I'm Gar Willoughby, and I love being a teacher, and I love coffee. So I'm going back to school to share with you some amazing teacher strategies that you can use in your class and why being an educator is the best job in the world. When I thought about the first, who could be one of the originals in this podcast journey, it was Vittoria Werner. In this very first episode of Teachers and Coffee, Vittoria will be discussing visible thinking routines, restorative practice circles, and all the cool things educators can utilize on Google Drive. All right, buckle up, fill your cup, and thanks for joining us in this very first episode of Teachers and Coffee. Hi, Vittoria, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. This is so great.
Thanks. Thank you for joining me. And so, as the title to the show says, Teachers and Coffee, what brew do you have with us today?
I'm so oddly specific. So I have almond milk, and then I have just drip coffee that the same kind of coffee everyone makes. I buy it at Costco. But I am a firm believer that collagen peptides have changed my nail health, my hair health. And then collagen is just great for your skin and stuff. So I have 2 scoops of collagen that's dissolved in my coffee as well. So almond milk, collagen, and then just brewed coffee from Costco. So nothing too exciting, but not a normal order.
Fascinating. Now I've got to ask you, because I pass these by in the grocery store all the time. Fish oil. What's your verdict on getting those supplements, fish oil supplements?
So we actually don't eat meat in our house, so I don't do fish oil, but I do an omega-3 and an omega-6 that's plant derived. It actually comes from seaweed. And so a lot of the omega-3s and omega-6s that you would find in your fish oil are because the fish eat seaweed, right? So I'm all about it. I'm all about it. I think it's great. I think it's great for your brain health. So I take a supplement. I encourage people to take a supplement. So fish oil, I say go for it.
Wow. Maybe we should change this to Coffee and Healthy Choices with Teachers show.
That's hilarious.
That is that's good to know. Good to know. Tell me I know this, but tell the audience, what is your current teaching position at Oxford Virtual?
So I teach mostly at the middle school level. I have some elementary classes that are electives, but last year I was full-time science, and this year my roles changed slightly. I still do some science work. I have a lot of haiku electives, and then I am supporting Andy and the rest of the CBE team on implementing some CBE courses at OVA.
Great. And for our listeners, what is CBE?
Competency-based education. So while it's kind of this overarching theme of students achieving mastery at their own pace and having the opportunity, some voice and choice in what they are doing and what they're mastering, I'm finding that a lot of the themes of CBE really align to a lot of other initiatives that we've had district-wide, International Baccalaureate, an IB curriculum really reminds me of CBE. And then project-based assessment really reminds me of what an assessment would look like in CBE. So while it kind of has this big overarching title, I think a lot of it is just really good teaching practice and kind of meeting students where they're at.
Great. For our listeners, some will be traditional and some may do hybrid. Tell me, as an educator, what do you enjoy about online teaching, and what are some challenges that come along with this?
So one thing I really like about online teaching, and it's the same thing I liked in seated world as well. I feel like there's an opportunity, especially online, and it attracts a certain type of student that maybe needs us a little more, needs that teacher support a little more. And I always love supporting those kids in seated. And I think in online, those kids really kind of just rise to the forefront. You really can see which kids need that extra love, that extra support, and maybe that little bit of extra attention. And I love building that connection. So that's one of the things that I love about online teaching is really getting the opportunity to see those students that maybe have a tumultuous home life, or even someone who is like an extremely good athlete, right? And so the traditional school setting doesn't work for him or her. But I really love connecting with those kids. Challenges of online is that I am like an early bird in the morning and I eat like a 5 o'clock dinner and go to bed at like 9. And when those kids are sending emails at 11:30, midnight, 1 a.m., I'm like, how I cannot help you at 1 a.m., guys. I don't know how you're doing your schoolwork right now. But that would probably be my biggest thing is when I wake up to like 6 emails and they all came in the middle of the night asking for help. I'm like, whoa, hold on, I'll get to you, I promise. But that always blows my mind that they're working in the middle of the night.
Right. We're kind of always on duty, aren't we?
Exactly.
This might tie into some of your strategies. What advice would you give to a teacher or to parents where a student is just having a tough time getting started and they're just not super motivated? And this is everywhere. This is in the seated world. This is virtual. This is hybrid. What tricks or what advice would you give?
So one of the things that I think is great about online is that we have a lot of flexibility and a lot of opportunities to differentiate. So in those situations, first I try to get the kids on Zoom, like first and foremost, hound until we can get them on Zoom. Because once we see each other face to face, I think building that connection becomes a lot easier. And getting to know their interests a little bit just becomes a little bit more natural because it feels more like a conversation than via email or even over the phone. I think when you can see someone's face, you're a lot more willing to share and to really engage. And then once we're on Zoom and that conversation, I like to go through the class with the student and say, okay, which unit, like I understand fully that we're supposed to go in order, but is there a unit that you see like that is cool to you, like that is interesting to you, and start there. So if it's a student who's a non-starter, say, okay, so you are really into, for science specifically, you're into biology and animals. Well, unit 2 is going to talk about ecosystems. So let's start there. And then once we find that unit that's going to really engage them, because we don't have to follow the same pattern as a class. Like in a seated school, we would have to go, okay, well, this is the plan. And we've got 30 kids that are all going to do the same plan as you. So we have the opportunity to kind of pick and choose, right? So get that student engaged in something that is going to pique the interest a little bit and then hold them accountable. And with that accountability, I know that we have students that flake and that no-show, but to start off, I do a daily check-in. So we're going to be on Zoom every single day, 10 minutes. And if they show up and have done nothing, that's okay. We're going to do it together. And then slowly, hopefully, like scaffolding and weaning off of that accountability. But like that would translate right into seated. And seated, they would be in front of you and you could kind of hold them hostage for a few minutes at the end of class and say, okay, like we're going to get this done, you and me, before you go off to math. We've got this. So holding that same standard that you would in a seated classroom, but using that ability to differentiate and be flexible to your advantage to kind of catch them and reel them in. And typically parents are on board with that. I haven't had a parent that's said no.
Great. Yeah, it's a lot about building relationships, and that's what you're doing when you build those bridges like that. Right. Well, gosh, I have a couple questions, but let's get into your strategies. The 3 things that I know that you're passionate about many things, but tell me what do you mean with visible thinking routines? Is this kind of a concept where people are envisioning where they are 5 days from now or 10 days from now? I'm curious, what are visible thinking routines?
So the book is called Cultures of Thinking, and it's by Ron Richard, and he is a Harvard professor. And he talks about like these 8 kind of like pillars of education, but he provides all these different, he calls them his thinking routines. And again, a lot of these I think are good teaching practice, but I found when I started at OVA that students would submit an assignment and I had no way of knowing if they actually learned and understood and answered the questions, or if they asked mom, or if they found a friend, or if they Googled it. And some, not all, but some of the assignments I felt were very surface level, right? Like Googleable, I should say. So with the visible thinking routines, what it does is it provides students an opportunity to literally show what they're thinking about. So the routines are typically done seated, and a lot of the times they hold a large group discussion. So you do have to modify them slightly for that one-on-one in this online environment, but they are routines that really give students prompts that require them to explain what they're thinking about. And it's not always the easiest to grade. A lot of times it's if you did this, I'm going to give you credit just as a thank you for participating. But what it did was it gave me an opportunity to really see, are the students learning and understanding the content? And then that's translating into these assignments and assessments. And it took away that doubt that I had as to if the students were truly understanding or if they were just spitting out information. There's visible thinking. The website's called Project Zero, if you go to it. And they have different categories of types of routines. Like there's inquiry routines, or there's routines for art, or routines for informational text. So whatever you're doing, you can kind of find a routine for. And then just like, they're really short. Typically it's like 3 questions or something simple, and implementing that into the assignments kind of gave me an idea and just an understanding of where students were at. And it allowed me to kind of really be ahead of the formatives. So if I could see in a visible thinking routine that somebody was totally lost, right? Like if I asked you to, one routine I use in science a lot is where they have to make up a claim, then find evidence for that claim, and then ask a question to further develop that. And if their claim is way off, they have no evidence, and they can't even think of a question to go further, then I have right away, we're not understanding this. And I can catch that before we even get to the assignment or the quiz, and kind of do a quick intervention with the student, and hopefully prevent them from getting a poor grade on something where then it becomes a little harder to figure out where we went wrong. But I love them. I love them. I love them. I use them in seated. I think they're amazing for online. I actually think they're more valuable online. And while they do require a little bit of modification, the Project Zero website is a great resource for lots of these little routines that you can implement to see where students are at and what they're really thinking about when they're submitting assignments.
Wow, that's fantastic. Project Zero website. And what was the Pillars by Ron Hubbard? What was the name of the book again?
Ron Richart is his name, and the book is called Cultures of Thinking.
Fantastic. All right. The next thing, restorative practice circles. What is this?
So with the restorative practice circles, the idea of restorative practices is intervention and connection and community with students. And that is very hard to replicate and create in the online environment. But some of the concepts of restorative practices, like for example, in seated, we would all sit in a circle, we would face each other. So we'd be making eye contact. All students would get a chance to speak. Some of those pillars I try to take into the Zooms that I'm doing with students. And one of my favorite things from restorative practices is asking students, when we start a Zoom, what's one word to describe how you're feeling today? And I sometimes get a question back or like about school or about life. And I'll say about anything, whatever you're feeling today, how are you feeling? And I would say 50% of the time I get words like anxious, stressed, upset, sad, annoyed, something that would give me an indication that there's something else going on prior to coming to the Zoom. And if I don't have a good connection with that student yet, then I'll kind of just let that be and say, thank you so much for sharing that with me, but keep it in the back of my mind. But if it's somebody who I do have a connection with, it opens the door right away to have that conversation of what is going on. So the idea of restorative practices is to ask questions that are open-ended, but allow the student the opportunity to have a voice in the conversation. And I've really found that those fundamental practices have helped me in making connections with students online. That asking that, what's one word to just describe how you're feeling today? Or what's one word to describe how you feel about this class? And sometimes I'll get good. And that's okay. That's really basic. That's fine. Maybe you don't feel comfortable in sharing with me yet. But sometimes when I say, what's one word to describe how you feel about our science class? I've gotten boring. And then I can go, okay, so why do you feel like it's boring? And it really just saying one word lets them feel empowered. Like everybody can handle one word, but it opens the door for the further conversation, where I really feel like I can connect with that student. And because we have the opportunity to differentiate, right? Everything comes back
Right.
to that. We have that flexibility. Those conversations help me to make this more engaging and enjoyable for the student, or it gives me the opportunity to understand what's going on outside of their school life and then
Yep.
modify my workload per se this week and maybe make next week a little heavier based on what's going on.
Right, right. What a great building relationship practice. Um, do you ever use this in a group Zoom or is it primarily one-on-one?
It's really effective in a group Zoom, I found, and where typically in like a circle, you would let everybody have a voice and say something. In a group Zoom, I found that if I say, what's one word to describe how you feel today, ask the students to write it down and then hold it up to their screen. I get a really good quick snapshot of everybody, but again, it lets them feel empowered. They have that moment to write it and think about it and then hold it up. And then students see where other students are at too, which I found to be very powerful, where if one student sees another student who says stressed or anxious, before I even have the opportunity to say something, somebody will step up and be like, why are you stressed out? What's wrong? And it really can build that community as a group too, by allowing the students to have that interaction.
Wow, wow, fantastic.
Oxford open-handed, Oxford open-handed.
Do you have any gently used winter clothes or shoes that are no longer used? Whether it's autumn, winter, spring, or summer, consider donating to Oxford Open Handed. Created by the Scott and Leanne Huller family, Oxford Open Handed helps reach Southeast Michigan families in need. This is what they basically do. The Huller family collects items from the community, organizes the items in their basement and garage, and then redistributes via web signups or at community events. If you would like to help, donate, or know a family in need, please Google Oxford Open Handed or go to the Huller Open Handed Facebook page today. A huge thank you to the Huller family for creating and operating this amazing charity.
Oxford open-handed.
All right, and the last thing that we'll discuss with awesome teaching strategies is your passion for Google Drive. Everything on Google always. Now, Vittoria, I think this is a great topic. I mean, all of these are. When I first came to OVA, I probably had about a sixth grade education in Google Drive. And as time went along, I'm like, okay, maybe I have my associates. And probably I've gotten to the point of maybe a bachelor's in Google. I mean, as a rookie, I would send questions to teachers and say, "I'm sorry, but I don't see what you're talking about in this document." And they say, "Oh, there's 5 tabs down at the bottom of your Google Sheet. You need to open the third one." And even to this day, I forget to look down at the tabs. Or when it comes to simply making a link within a Google form or a Google Sheet, sometimes I forget how simple that is. So I am so excited to talk about this and the advantages of being knowledgeable in Google Forms, Docs, Sheets, etc. So go tell me about your passion for Google.
So I listen, I'm similar to you. Like pre-OVA, I was kind of all over the place. Like there was no organization and I used it, but it was just there. And at OVA, I will say like Andy and Donna have been my two saviors in understanding Google. And I have found that my life is just so much easier when I have a strong, organized Google Drive. If everything's in there, the same place. And then you were talking about linking. Like I found linking to be like everything for organization and ease. I've got like student documents all linked to one document. I've got the tracking sheets all linked to one document where I can look up a student and click and say, oh, they're an ELL learner, or, oh, and here's the link to the tracking sheet for the 504. And like just having that organization and not feeling like things are all over the place. Like I just remember the days of like having to track student accommodations and having a binder, and even like that 10 minutes wasted of like go to the tab for this student, pull it open, write it down, remember to do it in the moment of doing it. I just have found that this has made my life so much easier and taken up so much less of like the monotonous time in our day. And I know we're all overwhelmed and we all have a million things to do. So finding ways to just free up even a little bit of time is so crucial to be successful. And I just feel like Google Drive has saved my life in so many different ways. But listen, like as far as being an expert on it, I am just like you, like still learning. I'm a huge believer, huge fan, and I love it. But if it weren't for Andy and Donna with her incredible Excel spreadsheets and transferring that to Google Sheets, I would be nothing. Like they are my go-to people.
Yes, Andy and Donna are amazing. I've learned so much from Andy. Andy worked last year as a mentor, and I mean, the learning I have is exponential when it comes to Google Docs and figuring things out. And then from Google Forms, I mean, for our listeners, anyone who's listening, check out Google Forms. It is so valuable. You're allowed to then send out all these questions. You can put cute little pictures in it. People are interested. It's friendly. It's warm. Then they open it up. And when you get the data back, you can then put it into an Excel sheet where you can find people's information, find their answers. It's great for teachers, students, everybody. Victoria, do you know, like if somebody, because really the best way to learn Google is through practice, is through applying it ourselves. Did you take any classes? Are you aware of any? I mean, I see commercials every once in a while where people get jobs as Google advice people, but do you know of anything that people might want to do or look into to advance their knowledge of Google Drives and concepts?
I wish I could think of who put on the class, but my sister, she's actually a senior in college, and she just took an online course on understanding Google Drive. And it was an understanding Google Drive. And then there was different offshoots of the class, like for business, for finance, for education. And she did it online and it was free. I wish I could remember. You know what? I'll email it to you.
Okay,
figure out
great.
what it was, but I know it's available because she did it for
Yes.
free and loved it. She said it was fantastic.
Probably all people have to do is Google. How do I get better at Google?
That's hilarious.
But we can't emphasize enough how valuable it is for saving your time and time management. Victoria, I think, gosh, I don't want to make the show super, super long for our listeners. You have been so helpful and given a lot of great resources and advice. Let's close things out. Let's say that there's a newer teacher or a teacher who, they're overwhelmed and they're just bogged down with life, time management and so forth. What advice would you give for newer teachers or, even older teachers when it comes to the work-life balance and just making teaching more enjoyable and less stressful?
So I'll be completely transparent. When I came to OVA and at the start of this school year and last school year, I had many days of like breaking down, sobbing because I was overwhelmed and everything felt new. And I really felt like I was bad. I don't even know if that makes sense. Like I really felt like I used to be a good teacher and I'm just terrible at this when I first started at OVA. And then even this year when my role kind of shifted, I was like, I'm just really ineffective. Like I'm not good at this. And I think everybody has those moments, right? So allowing yourself to feel the moment and just like, remember, it's just a moment. Whatever you're happening or whatever thought it is, it's just a moment. So I will actually set timers for myself to like feel sad and have self-pity. So I'll set like a 3-minute timer and I'm like, this is a moment. You're feeling a moment and your moment is justified to feel overwhelmed. But when that timer is over, I have to push that moment out of my head. So that's one strategy that I do use because I think that no matter if you're new or struggling, we all struggle. Everything will feel new at some point. So I just let myself really have that moment and then set that timer and say, okay, this moment is over. I need to really get it together. So that's one really, I think, effective strategy.
Yes.
And then as far as that work-life balance, like I have a therapist that I see, and she told me, set a timer, like at noon, make that be your lunch and like go for a walk. And there are days in OVA world and online world where like you just can't, right? Like it's not a possibility. I get that other people at other jobs can do that, but it just doesn't work in our world sometimes. Like the emails keep coming and the kids need help and we all just want to give. And so on those days, I completely embrace that that's what today is. Like today is a day where I'm going to give myself to my job and to these students, and it is what it is. But then there are other days where it doesn't feel so overwhelming and things are good and it's great. And so then when I do take that lunch at noon, before I start, I really try to like have a moment of positivity and gratitude and say, this day, it is beautiful outside. I'm able to eat my lunch on my deck. No other job can do this, right?
Yep.
And really have those moments of reflection and gratitude. But I think the biggest thing that's helped me is remember that everything is just a moment. When you're stressed out, you're overwhelmed, it feels new, it feels awful. It's all going to pass. Allow yourself to be in the moment, but don't let it dwell. Don't let it overtake your day. Set that timer and then try to move on.
Set that timer. I love it. And if I could bounce off that a little bit too, I get it. You know how a lot of veteran teachers who have been teaching for 20, 25 years, and then something like CBE, content-based education, comes and they're just like, another acronym. Yay. Yeah. And it just reminds me that, change inherently is not a fun thing sometimes for people. And so when we are throwing curveballs or we're throwing new things to do, I try to remind myself that, change is frustrating, because just as soon as you think you've mastered something or you become good at something and you want to just keep going with that because you're doing really well and it's what you're familiar with. But education is always a changing field. There's new technologies, there's new strategies, there's of course new acronyms. And so just to realize to embrace change and realize that it's okay to fail. It's okay not to do well. And just as long as you're moving towards getting better and improving, it will all be okay in the end. And
I love that. That's great.
And set that timer, right? I mean, let it
absolutely
let it go sometimes. Well, Vittoria, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
This is so great, Gar. I love this. And I can't wait to hear other people and learn from our peers. This is so fantastic.
Great. Well, Vittoria, I'm going to send us out here with our theme music. And I appreciate you for joining me. And we will see you next week with our next version of Teachers and Coffee. Special thanks to our gracious guest, Vittoria Werner. I also want to personally thank Joe Amabile for giving me his creative and technological insight for bringing this show to life. To Scott and Leanne Huller for their inspiring charity, Open Handed. And to the administration and staff at Oxford Virtual Academy, who are so supportive of me in making this dream come true. And we can't forget our wonderful sponsor, Evergreens Coffee and Bake Shop. The guest on Teachers and Coffee will receive an Evergreens coffee card good towards one amazing cup of coffee at Evergreens. Evergreens is located on 9 South Washington Street in Oxford. And don't forget to try the amazing bagel bomb. Next week, we will hear from awesome, the amazing, and the always energetic Hillary Jacobson, as she will share her favorite strategies on using the technologies of Padlet, Google Forms, and Screencastify. This is your host, Gar Willoughby, signing off until next time. Teachers, you rock. Keep making a difference and making this world a better place.